Today we're going to be doing a book review on The Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. I think it is one of the most fascinating books that I've read all year, and I really want to share it with you to show you how awesome it is. The book, I initially didn't think I was going to like it because it was a boy book and it was about a Native American reservation, or as he calls it, the Res, the guy that we're going to meet today in the book, Junior. And I just didn't think I would buy into it that much, but after the first chapter, I was hooked and I could not stop reading it. I read it in about 3 days, and you know my crazy schedule, so I finished it really quickly. I think you're gonna love it. A few of the students that I talked to initially didn't like the first chapter because they couldn't understand it. So I'm going to read the first chapter to you in hopes that you'll kind of get into the book and really get hooked by the end. I have a bunch of copies in the classroom. I have copies on our Kindles at school, so you'll be able to access those if you ever want to see it. There's tons of copies that are available. This book, I will warn you, is messed up. There's stuff that happens in it that you would never think you would ever read in a book. In fact, you'll probably be shocked by some of the things that you hear. I won't tell you all of them because I probably shouldn't even mention them. You're just going to have to read them for yourself. But the part that I'm going to read to you today is about the character in the book. His name is Junior, and he lives on an Indian reservation. And he is a 9th grader. So he's the same age as you all. One thing I really like about the book though is it's a really easy read. It's written on a 3.5 grade level, so you guys know what your reading level is, so that'll be helpful for a lot of you who are trying to find books at that level. This is finally one that's written really well that I think you'll be able to easily access and really get into. Let's read an excerpt from the book, Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman, Alexie. I was born with water on the brain. Okay, so that's not exactly true. I was actually born with too much cerebral spinal fluid inside my skull. But cerebral spinal fluid is just a doctor's fancy way of saying brain grease. And brain grease works inside the lobes, like car grease works inside an engine. It keeps things running smooth and fast. But weirdo me, I was born with too much grease inside my skull. And it got all thick and muddy and disgusting, and it only mucked up the works. My thinking and breathing and living engine slowed down and flooded. My brain was drowning in grease. But that makes the whole thing sound weirdo and funny. Like my brain was a giant French fry. So it seems more serious and poetic and accurate to say, I was born with water on the brain. Okay, so maybe that's not a very serious way to say it either. Maybe the whole thing is weird and funny. But geez, did my mother and father and big sister and grandma and cousins and aunts and uncles think that it was funny when the doctors cut open my little skull and sucked out all the extra water with a tiny vacuum? I was only 6 months old, and I was supposed to croak during the surgery, and even somehow if I survived the mini Hoover, I was supposed to suffer serious brain damage during the procedure and live the rest of my life as a vegetable. Okay, so that's the very first part of how the book opens up, and I think it's so fantastic. It talks about his water on his brain and kind of gives a really gross description of how he was when he was born. And he actually has hydrocephalus, and that's what he's referring to as water on the brain. So it talks about all the things that are wrong with him in the beginning of his life that kind of form who he is and who he becomes. So for those of you who have read the first chapter of The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian and you said, you didn't like it, I would really urge you to continue to read it, because the second and the third chapter really go far beyond that. And it talks about him being poor and what it's like living on the Indian reservation. And then it goes in even better. The further you go in the book, the better it gets, and the more personal the story is. And the more you get to know Junior, the character in the story, and you find out all of his weaknesses and how he tries to become this really super strong person, but on the inside he's really still dealing with all this troubled past. You fall in love with him, and you want to be around him every day, and you want to, like the foreword says, you want to be like Junior, you want to talk like Junior, you want to hear more from him. And I think that's the really cool thing about this book, is that you want to keep reading and you don't want to put the book down. And that's why I read it so fast, and that's why I want you to read it. I want you to read it because it's a good book. I want you to read it because you won't be able to put it down. I want you to read it because it's fun. Happy reading! I hope you like The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie.